Well, if Democrats can retake the House in 2024, you would return as chair of House Ways and Means. And that means
that would be part of the plan.
That would be the plan. That's what you're certainly hoping for. If with Catherine Clark, now Democratic whip, the delegation would get a lot of clout. We would gain a lot of clout here in Massachusetts. What do you think that means for voters here? And what are your top priorities should that happen?
I'm glad you raised that question. The Ways and Means Committee, during my time as tenure with the former president and with the current president, we shepherded through the CARES Act, the CHIPS Act, the American Rescue Package, the multi-employer pension relief system. We put through the infrastructure. All of this happened. And we did it on a bipartisan basis at the beginning, and then a more partisan basis as time moved along, no doubt about it. But look at how the American economy rebounded as opposed to the rest of the world. A 3.6 unemployment rate in America right now. 8 million jobs are available right now, given the fact that all 22 million that we lost during the pandemic have now been returned.
So in the fall, what would your new priorities be? What would they be?
Well, some of it is obviously we're going to have to address many of the challenges that confront the federal budget. There's no doubt about that. And I do think that the tax plan that we put out at the Ways and Means Committee and passed the House, which, by the way, was not met with much resistance across the country. I think that ought to be part of the conversation to get the deficit down, but acknowledging that there's going to have to be some spending cuts as well. We understand that.
Let's talk about taxes, because it is tax season, and who wins the White House and who controls Congress could have a pretty big impact on that, of course, as always. So the Trump tax cuts, as you know, sunset at the end of 2025 unless Congress extends that legislation. A lot of the provisions in there. A lot of Massachusetts homeowners would love to see the SALT deduction, state and local taxes, restored, which lets taxes deduct their state and local taxes. Is that still on your agenda?
It sure is. And in fact, in the tax bill we put out, we addressed that very issue. I noticed that Speaker Johnson yesterday was trying to give some sort of solace to the Republicans in upstate New York, because right now this is a real problem in New Jersey and New York for Republicans, and also in pockets across the country, in California, for example. But the SALT deduction, based on what those states provide to the federal government in terms of revenue and what they get back, is disproportionate.
Well, it's double taxation, right? I mean, you're being taxed by the feds on money you're already paying to the state or local government.
There's no question about it, coupled with the fact that I think for us at the Ways and Means Committee, we were also able to use it to tweak our colleagues on the other side over the SALT deduction. It is the preponderance is heavily influenced by what happens in the Northeast, but not to miss the point, there are some red districts across the country that have the same challenge.
All right, we did talk about cuts a bit, but Republicans have asked for $10 billion in IRS cuts this year. Are you concerned about the impact that might bring?
Yes, and I'm against it. I think that the plan that we put out from the Ways and Means Committee, addressing what had happened to the IRS, you can already see how calls and service is being improved dramatically. You can see that the position of the IRS is not to audit people below $200,000 a year as joint filers. They're going to go towards more along the lines of dividends and what we would call unearned income. Those are parts of it. But the IRS needs to do its job. And let me just say something, because you raise a great question. Congratulations to the American people. 86% of the American people file their income taxes on time. It's pretty wild when you stop and think of the compliance ratio that we have in America. And that speaks to the notion of the civil discourse. It should be part of paying taxes.
So when you call the IRS, they'll pick up the phone this season?
They'll do it within 3 minutes, I believe.
All right. Good to hear. Congressman Neal, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.